Imagine being chosen among hundreds of women to spend the night with the most powerful man in the world. But instead of romance, you are met with icy silence, strict surveillance, a list dozens of eyes fixed on you, guards, eunuchs, officials, no privacy, no conversation, no room for error. Welcome to the hidden world of the Imperial Harem inside China's Forbidden City, a place where desire, duty, and danger coexisted daily. Behind the imposing crimson walls and beneath the gleaming golden roofs of the Forbidden City, there was a room unlike any other, a chamber not of pleasure, but of control, the emperor's private bedroom. To the uninitiated, this inner sanctum might have seemed like a realm of indulgence and sensual luxury, a space where the son of heaven withdrew from the burdens of power to treat himself to beauty and silken delights. But the truth was far more complex and far more suffocating. Every inch of this space, from the bed with its embroidered dragon pillows to the incense burners that perfumed the air, was governed by strict codes of conduct. Every breath of the emperor was watched. Every move of his companion was recorded. Every flicker of candlelight cast shadows on a scene where nothing was left to chance. This was not a bedroom. It was a throne of flesh and silk, a theater of duty. Though the emperor held absolute power over an empire of millions, he was never truly alone. Not even in his most private moments. His desires were documented, his nights scheduled, his concubines chosen not just for their beauty, but for their lineage, fertility, and political value. An invisible machine of power surrounded him. Advisors who maneuvered behind silk curtains, who held secrets and keys, ancient rituals designed to keep the bloodline pure and the balance of power intact. Even the touch of a woman's hand was choreographed. Even passion followed a script. Inside the gilded chamber, emotion bowed to ceremony. Intimacy submitted to empire. And the man believed to be the most powerful in the world was, in many ways, the most watched of all. Each evening, once the final scroll had been signed and the last imperial command issued, a quiet but powerful ritual began, one that would determine not only who shared the emperor's bed, but who might shift the fate of the empire itself. After his formal dinner served and polished silver under strict dietary code sand, once his ministers had bowed themselves out of sight, the emperor would withdraw into the hushed stillness of his private chambers. There, lit by the golden glow of candlelight and the subtle scent of a single ceremonial object awaited him on a low lacquered table, a rectangular tray, crafted from dark, polished wood, inlaid with gold leaf and mother of pearl. Upon this sacred surface rested a collection of smooth jade plaques, each carved in the elegant brushstrokes of court calligraphy. Each plaque bore a name, not just of a woman, but of a family, a faction, a future. These plaques represented the women of the Imperial Harem, consorts, concubines, noble-born favorites. To outsiders, it might appear to be a moment of personal indulgence, as if the emperor were casually selecting a companion for the night. But this was no idle choice. The tray was presented by the chief eunuch, an aged yet watchful figure whose role in this moment extended far beyond mere service. He was the guardian of secrets, the keeper of the emperor's body, and perhaps most importantly, the silent manipulator of imperial intimacy. The arrangement of the plaques was never random. Some names were placed subtly closer to the emperor's favored hand. Others were turned at a precise angle, catching the candlelight in a way that made them glimmer just slightly more. A well-placed plaque could rise a woman's fortune. A poorly positioned one could bury it. These small gestures, barely perceptible, were loaded with political weight. Was a noble clan to be rewarded with greater favor? Was an alliance to be strengthened through intimacy? Was a rival consort to be quietly sidelined? In this moment, the emperor appeared free to choose. But in truth, he was guided by 1,000 invisible hands, family interests, court factions, subtle persuasion from his most trusted eunuchs and advisors. And when he finally reached forward, lifting a single plaque between his fingers, the decision seemed casual, effortless. But that small, silent gesture had the power to ripple across the entire court. Choosing a plaque meant choosing a woman. Choosing a woman meant empowering her household. And empowering her household could shift loyalties, incite jealousies, and even alter the balance of dynastic succession. It was not just a night of intimacy that was being decided. It was a game of politics played not on the battlefield, but in the quiet flicker of lamplight and in the palm of the emperor's hand. The chosen woman is informed the moment a concubine's name was chosen, her jade plaque turned by the emperor's hand, an invisible signal was sent across the palace. There was no announcement, no fanfare, just a quiet knock, a knowing glance from a eunuch, and suddenly her world changed. She was notified immediately, often without preparation, without time to compose herself. Her attendants, well-trained, loyal, and silent, moved swiftly, as if rehearsing a sacred performance. Every action was dictated by ancient codes and expectations. There could be no mistakes. First came the bath, no ordinary cleansing, but a ritual as old as the dynasties themselves. In a copper or jade tub, warm water was drawn, carefully infused with a rare blend of herbs, mugwort, to ward off ill petals, for purity and clarity, osmanthus blossoms and crushed orchid root. Believed to stimulate fertility and gentle beauty, the scent filled the chamber suite, almost otherworldly. The temperature was exact warm enough to open the skin's pores, but not so hot as to disturb the balance of the body's inner energy. Steam rose like mist from a sacred mountain, and the concubine would enter slowly, as though passing into a different realm. This was not about hygiene, it was purification, a ritual meant to cleanse not just the body, but the soul, as if she were being prepared not to meet a man but to approach divinity. Once the bath concluded, she was wrapped in the softest silk, dyed in pale tones of cream, rose, or lavender, each color chosen for its symbolism. A single robe was draped over her, embroidered with motifs of cranes, peonies, or peaches, all symbols of longevity, grace, and fortune. It clung lightly to her skin, whispering as she moved, a garment meant to convey purity and controlled beauty. She was permitted no personal adornments, no jewelry, which could distract or seduce, no metal hairpins, which might conceal poison or serve as hidden blades, no perfume. Beyond what the ritual bath had left upon her skin, even her nails were inspected, clipped, polished, but never painted. Nothing could be allowed that wasn't approved by palace law. She was not dressing for seduction. She was preparing to serve the Emperor, an act bound not by love, but by order, hierarchy, and destiny. Before she was permitted to leave her quarters, one final barrier remained: the inspection. A senior eunuch, chosen for his loyalty and unwavering attention to detail, would arrive and silence his presence alone, a reminder that even beauty must bow to protocol. He did not speak unless necessary. He did not smile. His task was not to comfort, but to protect the Emperor and by extension, the entire empire. With clinical precision, he began his examination. From head to toe, the concubine was scrutinized under the flickering lamplight. Her hair was parted and sifted, strand by strand, to ensure nothing, no thread, no pin, no hidden object had been concealed in the elaborate coiffure. Her sleeves were lifted, shaken lightly, then turned inside out. The delicate silk pulled taut to reveal any concealed folds. Her fingernails were examined, gently but thoroughly filed down, checked for unnatural substances or hidden blades. Her ankles and feet, though modestly veiled by silk, were also checked to ensure nothing had been slipped inside the shoes she would never wear, for she was not to walk, but to be carried. Even the simplest accessory could become a weapon. A poisoned pearl, a sliver of jade sharpened to a point, a vial of opium hidden in a hair ornament. All were possibilities that had, in the long history of palace betrayal, once been realities. This wasn't mere paranoia. It was a ritual born from blood and precedent. In the vast history of dynasties, emperors had been assassinated in their most vulnerable moments, poisoned by a kiss, stabbed in the quiet of night, betrayed by the one woman allowed closest to them. And while the harem dazzled with silk robes and gentle music, beneath the surface it was a battlefield of ambition, jealousy, and silent warfare. The inspection was not humiliation. It was armor. Armor against treachery. Armor against desire left unchecked. Armor against the illusion that even here, within the golden walls of the Forbidden City, the Emperor was truly safe. Once the inspection was complete and no trace of danger was found, the final phase of the ritual began, the journey to the Emperor's inner sanctum. But she would not walk there. She was not allowed to take a single step. Instead, she was lifted gently, ceremoniously onto a silk-covered palanquin, a kind of soft stretcher supported by two long poles of polished wood. For eunuchs, chosen not for strength alone, but for absolute trustworthiness, would carry her through the palace corridors. They were silent, expressionless, loyal only to the throne. They did not speak to her, or to one another. They were shadows moving, parts in a system that demanded obedience above all to an outsider. Being carried might seem elegant, even regal in indulgence fit for royalty, but within the Forbidden City, nothing was done without reason. This method of transport served a darker purpose. It prevented her from hiding anything in her shoes, which she never wore. It restricted her movement, ensuring she could not veer off course, visit another quarter, or slip anything unseen into her roband. Most importantly, it removed any chance of her taking unexpected action, whether to escape, to harm, or to plead. Her body, cocooned in silk, was now an extension of imperial protocol, carried like a relic, offered like a sacrifice. The journey was quiet, but never private. As she passed through the moonlit corridors of the palace, dozens of unseen eyes watched, from behind carved screens and shadowed balconies. Attendants, guards, and fellow concubines observed in silence. Some watched with envy, others with dread. She was both honored and isolated, favored and utterly powerless. No one spoke. The only sounds were the distant drip of water, the hushed rustle of robes, and the faint creak of sandalwood beneath the eunuch's feet. In that stillness, she had time to think, but never aloud. Was this a moment of triumph, a chance to win favor, rise in rank, even bear an heir? Or was it the beginning of jealousy, political entrapment, or the slow decay that came with being remembered too well, or not at all? The closer she came to the Emperor's bedchamber, the heavier the silence grew. Not a silence of peace but of ceremony, of surveillance, of sentries pressing down on her. By the time the procession reached the gates of the inner chamber, she was no longer just a woman. She was a vessel of dynasty, of desire, of danger, and beyond those doors, the emperor, powerful, and watched just as closely as she was not permitted to walk, not even a single step. To walk was a freedom, and in the Forbidden City, freedom was carefully rationed. Instead, she was lifted gently, ceremoniously into a silk-covered stretcher, its frame carved from red sandalwood, its cushions padded with cloud-soft cotton, and embroidered in gold thread with dragons, phoenixes, and lotus blossoms. The men who carried her were not ordinary servants. They were eunuchs hand-selected for their unwavering loyalty, sworn to silence, and trusted above all others. Their hands did not tremble, their eyes did not wander. They carried not just a woman but a symbol of imperial order. The act of carrying her served several hidden purposes carefully engineered over centuries of palace protocol. First, it neutralized risk. With her feet never touching the ground, there was no chance of concealed weapons hidden in shoes or sewn into slippers. Even the floor itself remained untouched, uncontaminated. Second, it ensured control. She could not veer off course, delay her arrival, or seek counsel from others. Every movement was supervised, every turn dictated. And third, it was a demonstration of hierarchy. She may have been beautiful, she may have been desired, but she was not equal. To be carried was to be reminded physically and symbolically that she belonged to the system, a vessel of the emperor's will, a participant in a ritual larger than herself. Even in silence, the message was clear: power does not walk, power waits, and the rest are carried. Upon arrival at the threshold of the emperor's bedchamber, the procession slowed. The flickering lanterns cast long, wavering shadows across the polished stone floor. Outside, the world held its breath. Before she could be allowed inside, yet another inspection might take place, brief, clinical, and unyielding. Even now, so close to the emperor, nothing was left to chance. Her robe was once again checked for folds, her hands observed, her demeanor noted. Only then would she be permitted to cross the threshold. Inside the chamber, the air was heavier, thick with incense, silence, and expectation. And at the center of it all stood the imperial bed, not just a resting place, but a stage upon which lineage, power, and history were shaped. It was no ordinary bed, raised slightly above the floor on a carved platform of rosewood. It was adorned with silk cushions and quilts embroidered with dragons soaring through clouds, phoenixes poised in flight, and lotus blossoms, each stitch a symbol of divine rule, feminine virtue, and cosmic harmony. Here, she was gently laid down, positioned with care, like a sacred offering, and then, nothing. She was to remain perfectly still, absolutely silent, unless and only if the emperor spoke first. This silence was not born of shyness. It was policy. It was law. Every breath she took was part of a larger performance, one that reinforced the absolute hierarchy of the palace. He was the son of heaven. She was a vessel of duty. Outside the heavy doors of the chamber, eunuchs stood in patient formation, listening, counting, watching the movements of sand-filled timekeepers or tracing steps across the polished stone to mark the passage of minutes. If an hour passed without any signal, a voice, a bell, a summoned attendant, they were authorized to enter discreetly, not out of intrusion, but to ensure the emperor had not been harmed. Poisoning, suffocation, betrayal, history had seen it all. Every intimate encounter in that bed was, in truth, an act of tightly choreographed surveillance. There was no freedom, no spontaneity, no true closeness. This was not intimacy, it was protocol, affection wrapped in fear, desire measured by the hourglass, and love, if it ever existed, salanced beneath layers of silken ceremony. Once the allotted hour had passed, the ritual came to a quiet close, never rushed, never delayed. Without announcement or farewell, the woman was gently rewrapped in silk, her embroidered robe arranged with the same precision as before, as if erasing any trace that she had ever been there. No lingering, no embrace, no words exchanged. She was lifted once more onto the silk-covered stretcher, her face calm, unreadable, trained not to reveal longing, satisfaction, or sorrow. She returned exactly as she had arrived, silent, veiled, and carried. Through the same corridors she had come, she was transported back to her quarters. Only now, the night air was colder, the silence heavier. Whatever had passed within those gilded walls, desire, awkwardness, fear, duty, would never be spoken of again. No record would reflect her emotions. Only the time, only the fact that she had been chosen, and she was not allowed to remain, not even for a breath longer than the ritual permitted. There could be no closeness beyond what was sanctioned. To stay meant to presume, to speak meant to overstep. This rigid exit, devoid of warmth or farewell, served a far greater purpose. It reminded everyone, especially the women of the harem, that this was not a realm of romance. This was a system, a machine, and each woman was a carefully positioned part within it, allowing any one of them to linger, to influence, to comfort. To love was a risk the empire could not afford. The Imperial Harem did not exist to serve the emperor's pleasure. Pleasure was incidental. Its true purpose was to maintain balance, keep factions from gaining undue influence, to prevent one woman from becoming too powerful, to ensure that succession remained clear, neutral, and above the tides of personal desire, limiting time, by restricting affection, by making every visit identical in ritual and length. The court ensured that no one could rise too high, not without approval, not without consequence. And so, she disappeared once more behind silk curtains and locked doors, watched, recorded, forgotten. Until summoned again, every detail was recorded: who was summoned, when, for how long. These records weren't just ceremonial, they were essential for preserving the imperial bloodline. Pregnancy had to be verified. Lineage had to be clear. There could be no question of paternity. Even menstruation was tracked. A concubine on her period was forbidden from being selected. It was considered unlucky, a threat to the emperor's spiritual energy. To avoid shame or confrontation, some women used subtle signals: a red ribbon around the wrist, a discreet gold ring, or a red lantern outside the chamber door. Yet ambition could be blinding. Some concubines hid their condition, desperate for a chance to be noticed. If discovered, they faced harsh punishment. So eunuchs began to track even the private rhythms of a woman's body, turning her very biology into a tool of state surveillance. 2. Receive the emperor's affection was not always a gift. It was a double-edged honor, both a blessing and a curse. A single night could elevate a woman from obscurity to influence. A whispered word from the emperor could grant her family lands, titles, and security for generations. But with that rising favor came jealousy, resentment, danger. The more time a woman spent within the emperor's chambers, the more eyes turned against her. Concubines who had once been allies now became rivals. Whispers filled the painted corridors. Smiles concealed sharpened intent. Behind lacquered screens and beneath layers of silk, court politics took shape, not in open council halls, but in perfume-scented rooms and midnight appointments. Factions formed, schemes were hatched, rumors spread like fire in dry reeds. A single accusation of sorcery, manipulation, or forbidden influence could bring ruin, and sometimes even the empire itself trembled from within. One of the darkest examples came during the reign of the Joking Emperor of the Qing dynasty. Obsessed with alchemy, eternal youth, and the secrets of immortality, he turned his search inward onto the bodies of his concubines. Dangerous elixirs, mercury-laced tonics, and potions were prepared in secret chambers, and the women closest to him were forced to ingest them, not as lovers, but as test subjects. Some grew sick, some lost their minds, others died quietly and without ceremony. Desperation soon turned into rebellion. A small group of concubines, pushed beyond fear, plotted to kill the emperor himself. They had no army, no weapons, only their despair. The plan failed, and the punishment was swift, brutal. In its precision: torture, public shame, execution. The message was not whispered. It was screamed through blood and silence. No one, not even the woman who shares the emperor's bed, was safe from the weight of imperial law. In the Forbidden City, to be loved was not enough. To be favored was to be watched, and to rise to height was to invite the fall. Tragedy of Yang Gifanot. Every story was violent. Some were tragic. The legendary Yang Gife, beloved consort of Emperor Xuanzong, rose to unmatched prominence during the Tang dynasty. Her beauty was poetry, her laughter, music. But beauty comes with a price. Her influence angered generals and ministers. When rebellion swept across the empire, they blamed her to save his throne. Xuanzong ordered her death, or, at least, allowed it to happen. Whether she drank poison or was strangled remains unknown. But in the end, she died not for what she did, but for how much she was loved. The imperial harem was never truly about pleasure. It was a mechanism of power, of surveillance, of succession. A world where the most intimate moments were orchestrated like political ceremonies. In a realm where the emperor was both man and god. Every jade plaque, every whispered order, every silent night told the same story. In the Forbidden City, nothing, even love, was ever truly free.